Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I'll be analysing games using the mindset of speedrunning. This video will look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people will first play the game. This will look like a condensed standard review. Next we'll discuss the speedrun, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. Finally, we'll look at the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description. Today we're looking at Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. This game was a late release for the Master System, coming out in 1992. It follows similar physics and platforming to Castle of Illusion, but incorporates more adventure and exploration aspects. So let's start by talking about the controls. At heart, this is a platformer game. You can run and you can jump, and you can do this butt slam attack that kills enemies. You can also pick up blocks, and that's often used in the puzzle and problem solving aspects of the game. So you might pick up a block and use it as a platform or something, or you might use the block to kill an enemy instead or something like that. It's a pretty simple premise, but it leads to some pretty intricate mechanics later on. Even starting from level 1 we see some more complex mechanics, feeding the snake with the apple there. In each level you're going to find a key and you'll get this door, and that's how you beat it. Most levels are fairly linear left to right, but some get a bit more complex. Along with Mickey's standard moveset, you can also get some upgrades in this game. This one's the mini potion, and that lets you turn small, and you can get through small gaps like this. Absolutely essential for beating the game. This next one here is the rope upgrade, and that lets you climb up walls. So pretty fun stuff, and you can use it to find some secrets in earlier levels. It looks a bit like this. There are some more upgrades, but they all follow a similar trend. You get the upgrade and you can unlock new areas using it. So when you start the game, you're greeted with this map screen, and it looks pretty linear, but it turns out that it's not linear eventually. You have to do some backtracking. I am going to show the first little bit of backtracking because it is cool, but if you don't want to see that, skip ahead about 30 seconds. So normally you'd go across 1, 2, 3 and 4. As soon as you get to level 4, you realise, well, there's this little gap that you can't get through. You need to be small to get through that. So what do? Well, it turns out beating level 3 raises the water level in level 2. So you go back to level 2, and that higher water helps you find a secret exit, getting you to the left. So it turns out this castle down here is the real level 4. You get the mini potion and make that level 5, and then you can get through. So this game has a few cool backtracking things like that, and it just makes it a bit more intricate than a normal platformer. So this game's pretty polished for a Master System game. It's clear that a lot of work's been put into it, and the graphics and music really show. It has some cool effects like this scrolling effect in the cliffs level, and overall the graphics just look really nice in this game. The game also has some really cool puzzle problem solving elements. Although the physics are simple, they are extended to a great degree with this. An example of this is the coloured block puzzles, where you can use switches to make the orange and green ones change from tangible to non-tangible. And then there's some pretty sticky situations where you have to do these puzzles quickly and use your quick wit to do it. The game knows its physics engine well, and you can have some situations where you're using enemies to bounce across gaps that you couldn't normally get over. You can also strategically be the small Mickey Mouse so that you don't kill the enemy when you bounce over it, and that's something you'll pick up as you play the game. The game has some really cool sections, like when you're in this room but then you fall through the water and you end up in an upside down version of this room, and there's lots of puzzles involved with doing the parallel thing on the right way version and the upside down version. This game does have a 100% version, and that's when you collect all the power stars. Each power star will increase your health by 1 to a maximum of 5, but there's actually 14 in the game given that there's 14 levels. So that's something that you can seek out and look for as you're playing the game, and it does make it a bit more fun to 100%. Some of them are really tricky to get, and some do require backtracking to levels once you got the abilities to unlock them. So although this game is really polished and really fun, it's important to remember the context of when this came out. This came out in 1992, meaning that a lot of Super Nintendo and Genesis games are already out yet. I think if this game was released earlier, it would have been a really good selling point for the Master System, and it may have even helped the console do a bit better. But speaking of Super Nintendo games, I need to address an elephant in the room. This game bears a striking resemblance to Super Mario World. It's clear they took some inspiration. If you don't believe me, let's just have a quick look. So this level here looks pretty familiar to that one we just saw in Land of Illusion. And these enemies bear a striking resemblance to a certain enemy from Super Mario World. Just a very small resemblance there. We have the little ones in here and the big ones as well, just like Land of Illusion. Given that Land of Illusion came out after Super Mario World, it shows that they did have a go at this game and take some inspiration, but honestly I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Land of Illusion has a lot of unique aspects, and they clearly just taken inspiration from this game, and I like it because it shows that the people who made the game were into playing games themselves. So although Land of Illusion took a lot of inspiration from some other games, it does have very many unique aspects of its own. For example here, where that boulder chasing you ends up being the boss for the level, and you have to use the bricks that the boss pulls down from the roof to attack the boss itself. Boss fights in particular in this game are usually more complex than a standard just hit the boss a bunch of times. They involve problem solving and each boss is different. So that's a really high selling point of this game. This is going to conclude the casual review section, but if you haven't tried this game, I'd really recommend giving it a go. It's one of the best games on the Master System, very polished, and a really fun time to play. So here we have the leaderboard for Land of Illusion, and it's pretty competitive. So we got 20 runs on here, and 14 power stars. There's less runs, but it's still pretty optimized. 14 power stars you can consider to be the 100% category of this game. One thing that I want to note about this leaderboard is just how many people who run this game are from Brazil. That's a pretty common thing you'll see with Master System. For whatever reason, the Master System was really popular in Brazil, and it actually had a really long lifespan into the 2000s there. So you'll see a lot of Brazilian runners for Master System games, but also it's really good because often Master System games were not released in North America or Japan, and those are the regions which are normally NTSC, which means the game runs at 60 frames per second. In the PAL regions they run at 50 frames per second, which is slower. But quite often the game would have been released in Brazil, so we can justify running the game at 60 frames per second if it had a Brazilian release, which most Master System games did. So it's very handy. This game was released in North America, so we don't need to use the Brazilian release to justify running at NTSC speeds, but it's worth mentioning that that's the case for a lot of games. Today we're going to be looking at Alex's world record run, which is a 23:25. I won't talk about 14 power stars too much. While it is an interesting run, it's essentially just the same thing but grabbing a few extra power stars here and there. The other thing that you might have noticed is a big gap between this and a lot of other runs. Recently a skip was found in Toy Workshop, a developer-intended shortcut, and it saves about 40 seconds. So that's why a lot of these times here are pretty close, and since then Alex has done a run to get the 23:25. Just a heads up that the speedrunning section will unavoidably have some spoilers in it. I'll try and keep everything pretty much chronological, so the end of the game should fall towards the end of the speedrunning section. So as we start out watching the run here, you're going to see some fairly straightforward movement from Mickey, running, jumping, butt slamming, grabbing. He's going to do a skip on this crow here to get up to that branch, and we'll see lots of butt slam skips like that. I won't talk too much about optimizing the movement specifically until we get to the Taz section, but be aware that it'll be doing lots of small optimizations all over the place. We're going to see our first skip here, which is a developer-intended shortcut. There's this fake wall up the top, and if you wait for the snake, you can use it to bounce up that wall, skipping most of the level. One thing to note about the level is the time bonus. If you have more time left, it's going to take longer to tick down, so you do lose some of all the time that you save, but it's basically never worth waiting for the time to get lower to save time there. Level 3 has this pretty technical section where you're doing lots of picking up blocks and throwing blocks. Generally it's fastest to jump before you throw a block, so that's why Alex is doing a lot of jumping there when throwing. This can be pretty scary with the flame chasing you, but when you're trying to speedrun it's okay. Little damage boost there to skip that fire as well. There's a little strat coming up here throwing this chest into the chest in the water. Unfortunately Alex misses it in this run, but it would have hit the chest down here and skipped having to pick it up. We'll see lots of damage abuse in this run, just like this dragon coming up here, and that skips waiting for this platform to come up. Now I don't know why they did this, but they put an auto-scroller in this game, but this is kind of cool because it goes in reverse once you get to the end and you have to keep hitting these switches to make the auto-scrolling go back. A bit of a twist on the old formula. Now this is going to be one of the first glitches that we see in this run, and that's using the key to hold down the buttons. When you pick up the key, usually the button goes up with it, but if you pick up the key just as the button's going off screen, you can hold the button down just like that, and that saves a lot of time in this auto-scroller. In this level we're going to see an example of having speed from slopes. Alex is going to untransform there and speed down the slope. Usually you don't see the bottom half of those enemies as well, but you kill them when you butt slam down the slope. Have another cool developer intended shortcut here, just in this bit, another fake wall. And turns out this is the actual way you're supposed to get the power star in this level, so you kind of need to know this shortcut if you want to get 100%. This is one of the biggest stages here, Toy Workshop. It starts off with this puzzle that you can kind of skip. You're supposed to hold this button down and then jump through it, but you can jump through it if you're really quick with Small Mickey. But there's a developer intended shortcut here with another fake wall, and this was only found pretty recently, like a couple years ago. You do a little hop through there and then you make it all the way through. That actually wasn't in the very first TAS that I did of this game, but I recently redid the TAS, including that shortcut. There's another cool skip in this level. You're supposed to have that M jar and bring it up here with you. And what you're supposed to do with it is use it as a platform to make a high jump that you couldn't make. But you can just damage boost up this jump using that shooter there. Small time save, but on this boss we saw before, you can grab this block and bring it in, and that saves you waiting for one of the blocks to come down from the roof in the fight. Now this here is one of the more tense bits of the run in Craggy Cliff. You're trying to get through this section and trying not to get crushed. So if you're playing this casually and you're trying to run through, you might get impatient and run further than you otherwise should, but if you know how far you normally get, then you know where to stop. This is pretty easy in the speedrun once you're used to it, but if you're just learning it, you can die pretty often. The desert stage has kind of a cool part of the run. If you complete the stage normally, then you won't be able to beat the game. What you need to do is stop and get the secret entrance in this pyramid, and that gets you the cloud shoes. It lets you walk on the clouds, and that lets you do the beanstalk level. This one's really easy to miss, so if you're playing casually, you'll probably have to come and revisit Egypt once you find this out. Another developer intended shortcut in the room coming up. I don't know how this one was found, but if you jump there you'll get through the wall, and that's totally normal, it's not even a glitch. You have to be Small Mickey to do that though. This level has one of the biggest glitches in the run, and it skips the entire thing. So there's the key there which would normally open the door, and it's right at the start of the level. But if you put spring overlapping with the key, you can get bounced up through this floor here. Now you bounce up to where the door's going to be, so all you need to do is now pick up the key and you'll open the door just like that. Really cool glitch, saves a couple minutes. Sandcastle is one of the most interesting levels in the run. It starts off with these sand piles that can make you go really fast if you butt slide down them just like this. You can preserve your speed by jumping and sort of ducking on the ground, and we'll see in the TAS later you get heaps of speed off this section. The other glitch introduced in this level is called skinny dipping. So you need to transform to mini and then to big, and now you're invisible. And you can swim through that green chest up there and get up through this section, skipping the entire puzzle. Alex takes damage on the spikes there, and that's so that he can actually see Mickey Mouse again, but it's possible to stay invisible through the whole rest of this room. That saves a lot of time because the puzzle's pretty long, but it's the only time skinny dipping is used in this run. We have a small skip coming up here. There's two water streams and you're supposed to hold one down with the M jar, but if you just stand on it and then very quickly jump onto the next one, you'll make it up here without doing that. This crab boss can be quite complex in the speedrun. You have to wait to a particular point of its cycle for it to put its arms down, and it's pretty hard to tell when you can hit it just by looking. But once you're used to it in a speedrun, you'll know where you can hit it normally. The last level of this game starts with this auto-scroller. You have the option between 3 rooms, kind of like Super Mario World, but this one's the fastest. You damage boost across there and grab the star. A big part of this game is the star routing, making sure you got enough health to do damage boost while not taking too much time to go and grab extra stars. This room here has lava in the center of it, and what we need to do is turn that into water so we can jump through that. So Alex is going to go to the right here and hit a switch over here to turn it into water. Here's the switch here. Now when returning, we're going to see one of the biggest glitches in the run, and it's the key not despawn glitch. So normally when you throw a key at the door, you'll lose the key, but if you do very precise positioning, just like this, you won't lose the key. I don't know why it works, it just does. You can throw it from a running start, but it's pretty hard. You then throw the key at that door, and that means you get to use the one key on 2 doors, saving a bunch of time. If you didn't do that, then you'd have to do a big backtrack to go and get another key. That's actually one of the hardest bits of learning this run, because if you miss that glitch, you lose the key, and it means you lose the run basically because of how optimized the category is. I don't know why, but I really like this room. There's this scary door here that chases you, and then when you butt slam it, it turns into a normal door that you can go through. But you need to lure it all the way to the right and go through the door here, because that pillar there is solid and you can't get through it. And Alex is coming into the final boss just here. This boss has 3 cycles and takes about 2 hits on each of those cycles, kind of like Super Mario World, and you can manipulate the boss by standing behind her. So if you stand in front of her, she's going to do like a longer spinny bit, but if you stand behind her, she's going to do a shorter one. And there's very particular points that you have to stand in each part of this fight to manipulate to be the shortest. So that's Alex's run pretty much completed. As you can see, it's a very optimized run of the game, as you can probably see from the attempt counter up there. Alex has put a lot of work into optimizing this and making sure it's a really good demonstration of what's possible in this game RTA. If you're interested in picking it up as a speed game, I would definitely recommend it. It's pretty accessible, it's got lots of fun physics, you can get a pretty low time fairly quickly, and then if you want to get into optimizing it, you can start squeezing off the individual seconds just like Alex has done here. It's pretty competitive for a Master System game as well, with a really good community around it. Before jumping straight into the TAS of this game, I want to talk a bit about how the speed values work. So as Mickey walks, he's going to get a velocity of 1.5, and that's about as fast as you can normally go without any other terrain helping you out. But if you jump, you're going to lose that velocity a bit. So what's actually happening when you jump is you go from 1.5 to 1.469, then back to 1.5, then back to 1.469. So it's not much speed that you lose, but you do lose a little bit of speed whenever you're jumping. So in the TAS, you'll see all over the place, I'm just going to do tiny hops wherever I need to do a jump, because I want to be on the ground as much as possible. The other factor where speed comes into play is when you're hitting the speed cap. If I go to jump into this water, I'm going to get pulled down to a speed of 1. That's not good. But if I don't press the right button when I enter the water, my speed just gradually lowers down from 1. So what the strategy in the TAS is it jumps into the water, lets go of right, and then jumps back out again. Once you're back in the air, you can start holding right again to get back to 1.5, but when you're in the water, you need to let go. Otherwise, as soon as you hit the water, you're going to lose pretty much all your speed down to 1 every time. So normally the speed we can reach is 1.5 on flat ground, but that isn't the maximum. We can do a lot better by sliding down a slope. So you can see there the speed is 2.844 up the top right. So that's a lot better. But as soon as we hold right and leave this slope, we're going to snap down to 1.5. That's no good. So we can probably do better than that. Let's try sliding down the slope, but jumping out of it. You might have seen there, the speed only gradually decreases down. It doesn't snap down to 1.5. So that's a lot better. But we can do even better than that. There's an exploit you can do in this game where you frame perfectly duck and unduck. Let's have a look. So sliding down the slope, I'm going to hold right until I'm off the slope, and I'm going to snap to 2.875. Then what I'm going to do is keep unducking and ducking, unducking and ducking, unducking and ducking, unducking and ducking. And you can see there my speed is staying at 2.875 for the whole time. So you can just keep doing this, and you can even go up hills with it. And you can retain that speed of 2.875. But if I miss one, so let's say I have unducked for 2 frames in a row, I'm going to snap down speed to 2.75. You can then keep doing it again, and you'll retain whatever speed you had. So basically you want to get your speed up to 3 off a slope, and then just keep ducking and unducking as much as you can, and that'll retain like double walking speed for a really long time. Now that's obviously a bit too hard to do in an RTA speedrun, although you will see some runners do a little bit of ducking and unducking, because anything that you can do helps. But if you're in a Taz and you can duck and unduck 15 times per second, you'll get it perfectly, and you can keep that double walking speed through the whole level if you want. It's only used a few times in the Taz because there aren't too many slopes, but it is really useful whenever it's used. And the reason you can only do it at 15 times per second is because this game runs at 30 frames a second, and a duck will be one frame and then an unduck will be the next frame, so that makes 15 ducks per second. One last thing to mention about speed in this game are like ceiling ledges like this one. If you jump well enough at a ceiling ledge, you can get a little zip forward. It's kind of hard to see, but when you get it right, it will work. So I can do a few in a row here and show you. So those are the zips forward. You might see Mickey just moving a little bit more forward when he hits the ceiling ledge. Now let's have a look at our velocity value and see what happens during this. So normally we're sitting at 1.5 when we're jumping, and when we get the zip forward, which is kind of like here, looks like we're still sitting at 1.5, which is a bit weird. So it actually doesn't impact Mickey's velocity at all, but you can visibly see him get zipped forward when he does it. So to understand this, we need to look at the full picture of all our values. So we'll have a look at X, and let's have a look at what's happening to that. So take this frame for example, my velocity is 1.5, and I'm moving at 155.281 is where I am. So if I go to the next frame, I will move forward 1.5. So I'm at 156.781. So let's have a look at what happens when we hit the roof. I'm going up by 1.5 in the X each time, except for when I hit the roof frame, it's going to go up by more than that. So the number that I want you to look at here is dx on sort of like in the middle of those displays there, dx, which is currently 0. What dx measures is basically the same as velocity. So you can see here, velocity is 1.5 and dx is 1.5. dx literally calculates on that last frame, how many pixels did Mickey move forward? Well, the answer is 1.5 pixels, and more often than not, it's exactly the same as whatever the X velocity is. That's how the game works. Until you get into these situations, where the roof is pushing you out, and you get moved forward. So let's have a look at the dx value when we're getting pushed forward by this. So 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 3.4. And again, for another frame at 3.4. So that's pretty cool there. So every time you jump at a roof, it pushes you out, and you might save 1 or 2 frames every time you do that. This is only like about 0.05 seconds or something like that, but realistically these add up a lot over the Taz and save a bunch of time. And they're probably worth going for RTA as well, because it doesn't hurt to do a little jump at the roof. The only thing you'll lose is like a little bit of speed from jumping if you do it. So as I said before, these kind of zips are all over the Taz, and what's happening is you're getting inside a wall and getting ejected out, just like this one here. But there's no reason that you can't get ejected multiple times, so in this section of the Taz here, we climb up that ladder without actually climbing the ladder, just by getting ejected out over and over. So I'll slow it right down, and then we can hopefully see it. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Keep getting ejected out of the wall, and then you just keep gaining height and don't need to climb the ladder. So that's the other thing about these clips out of walls. Not only do they push you forward, but they also push you up. So if you can get a whole bunch of those clips in a row, you'll get pushed up this ladder and never have to climb it. Pretty cool stuff. That's the only time you really see one like that in the run, just because you need 2 walls that are extremely close to each other to do it. So as I said before, when you do these clips, you get boosted up a little bit. Now normally in this section, you can't jump straight up to where that little flame is, otherwise you'll take damage on it. So you have to go sort of under that platform and weave around it. But what the Taz does is it does this little zippy jump up there. So what that's actually doing is it's zippy jumping up on that wall and then getting over the flame. We'll slow it right down and have a look. Jump, clip the wall, get a bit more height from that clip and jump over to that flame. Without that height from the clip that you get there, jumping over that flame isn't possible, and in RTA speedruns they tend to damage boost off that flame, which is just a little bit slower. Now we're going to look through the Taz, which is by myself. This was made pretty recently and it saved about 40 seconds over my old Taz, mainly thanks to that toy workshop skip that was discovered since then. This saves about 1.5 minutes over the RTA world record, so you can see that world record's pretty optimized, and where this Taz saves time is just basically in movement and stuff like that. There isn't really a whole lot, no like big glitches in this Taz that save a whole bunch of time, so it really is down to those frame saves on movement everywhere. One thing that's hard to optimize in the Taz is grabbing keys just like that. When you go to grab an object, Mickey needs to run up against the object, and it's really complicated as to when Mickey will be able to grab that object. Sometimes you'll run at the object for ages and don't get the picking up animation, and then other times you'll get it right away, and it has to do with his speed and where he is in the walking cycle. This lake stage has an example of some not obvious optimization in the TAS. Here I'm trying to get past this water section, but I don't really need to go that fast, and we're about to see why. There's these blocks at the end, and you can only break them when the water is down at its lower level, and the water's going up now. So what I want to do in this water section is not get to the end fast, but actually reduce lag as much as possible, because the lag would slow down the water cycle. So I didn't get there as fast as possible, but it didn't matter because the water was up. In this tunnel here, there's like gusts of wind current stuff that comes through it, and when you get blown back, you have to grab the vines to stop yourself getting blown back further. How long it takes for those gusts to come up is actually RNG, so the TAS manipulates it to be as short as possible before the first gust. The reason you want it as short as possible is because you always get to that first vine and you can't get to the next one anyway. So you want the gust to come quickly so that it stops sooner and you can move on. One thing to note about this game is when you take damage, you go through objects, like that chest there. So that saves me having to ground pound that object and break it, which would give me a bounce back up and lose time. The TAS also does a damage boost across this lava, but I use that damage in underneath these platforms to get some of those ceiling zips across the gap. So there's one there and there. This level is where the game starts to get pretty laggy. So these fireballs are RNG, so I manipulate it to get the less laggy of the fireball options. And also you'll see me jumping off the top of the screen a lot. Reason for that is the game doesn't have to render Mickey when he's off the screen. So you want to get off the screen so the game has less to do, and that makes it lag less. This fight here has some pretty funky shots on the dragon's hitbox. If you turn around and throw it left, for some reason that makes it easier to actually hit the dragon. That saves a lot of time. Back in the revisit to the lake stage, now I actually do have to optimize getting across this lake. So it's all about doing jumps and not holding right so that I don't hit the speed cap in that water there. Also, you want to do your jumps at a particular height so that you don't sink down in the water too much. Because if you do a big jump, you'll land in the water with a lot of speed, go down further, and it'll be longer before you can get back out of the water. And every time you're in the water, even though we don't hit the speed cap, you're still losing a little bit of speed. So I mentioned before that it's kind of hard to grab objects. You'll see me turn around there before I grab the candle. Now the reason for that turnaround is because that puts Mickey in the right spot of his run cycle and right positioning to grab the candle a lot quicker. Back in this auto-scroller, which is absolutely awful, I actually saved about 2 seconds over my old TAS with a better understanding of lag reduction. You can see me jumping off the screen there to reduce lag a lot, and pretty much that's what it is. I saved 2 seconds literally just on lag, because there's no other way you can really speed up the scrolling that much. Now I mentioned here, there's a weird glitch that can happen in this auto-scroller. If you let the key scroll too far off the screen and pick it up, you'll pick up an invisible key. And also the little switch that the key was holding down will be gone until you step on it again. So yeah, this is kind of odd, and it happens because the key has gone off screen and deloaded. When you get back to the area that the key would normally be in, you'll see it loads back into Mickey's hands again. Now that key glitch we just saw, if you're familiar with Zelda N64 runs, it might remind you a little bit of SRM in that game. And it basically works the same way. The only other way we have in the game to get something even close to that glitch is on this little water spurter here. You can do a remote grab off of that jar there. But unfortunately, no matter what you do, you can't get the jar far enough away that it's off screen enough to grab it invisibly. It would have to be really far away. But if we just hack that in, well, we can have Mickey hold the jar and not really be holding anything at all. Not much interesting happens as you play the level as per normally, you just have it, and then if you go and throw the jar, you'll actually just throw nothing. Not really much interesting there. Except when you get into this room, which normally has this little jack-in-a-box punchy thing, if you're holding an invisible object when you come in here, well, now you're holding the jack-in-a-box. So very similar to SRM in Zelda, you're kind of having other items occupy the space where that jar used to be. The reason you can't get it in that key room from before is there are no other items that occupy the key slot. But in this case, later on, they use this box in the same slot as they had this jar in. You can get some funky effects with it, like if you just jump, it'll be punching in the air. And if you go to throw it, you can just throw it wherever you want, and it'll stay there until it punches down, in which case it'll go up and fall down and hit the ground. So that glitch has a lot of potential, but I just don't know of any other way to grab an object while it's off screen. That jar is the closest, but still it's a long way off being possible, and even then it's not very useful in this level. Coming back to the Taz now, normally when you walk through a door at the end of the level you have to come to a complete stop and slow down, but now that we've just got the mini potion in the Taz, we can just turn mini, which stops our velocity, and we get straight through the door. One other small thing to mention in this room, when the key drops on your head, Mickey will get clipped out of the key, and for whatever reason he turns left and immediately goes into the grabbing animation when that happens. So that's a really quick key grab there by using that clip. Flower Field stage has a lot of speed preservation stuff because the diagonal leaves are technically slopes where you can build up speed. It's also a very laggy stage, so you have to manage those two things carefully. We start building up speed here, and we have enough speed to jump over this gap and hit that fourth plant in. The special thing about the fourth plant in is that it spits you to the right rather than to the left, so we skip that whole dandelion puzzle there. Again, we have Toy Workshop stage, which is pretty similar in the Taz as the same as RTA. So this is the big improvement in this Taz compared to my old one, because this shortcut we're about to see wasn't known in the old Taz. So that saves about 40 seconds, which is really nice. After missing that secret shortcut in the Taz, I was really scared about missing more. So luckily Isotage put into ScriptHawk a collision viewer for this game, as we can see now. So basically what I did was play through the whole game and looked for any shortcuts using the collision viewer. This looks like a solid wall in game, but using the collision viewer we can see that's actually a shortcut that Mickey can walk through, if he's a small Mickey. It's pretty tricky to do so still, so it's not surprising that this one wasn't found for quite a while. Coming back to the Taz, we have the boss of this level, and this boss is pretty RNG based. When it spins around like this, it has a timer which is random, and that determines how long it spins for. So the Taz manipulates it to its spin for as short as possible, and that saves a bunch of time over just doing it willy-nilly. Speaking of RNG, in the next level these boulders are manipulated because they go in kind of random directions, heights and speeds. So the RNG is manipulated to make them hit these blocks as soon as possible so you can get through. The Taz uses a different strategy for this boss where it gets the boulder stuck in the top right corner at the start of the fight, and that's to do with the cycle the boulder is on before it starts. That saves a bit of time over the other strategy, which is bringing a block into the fight. In the desert stage we're going to see one of the biggest speed conservation sections in the Taz. This one is lots of fun. Every time I jump I lose a bit of that speed, so I've lost it pretty much all at this point. The Taz gets Good Princess's Castle skip pretty optimally. This can be done a little bit faster than RTA, but the method is still very much the same. It's just you get the clip pretty much instantly in the Taz. Normally after Good Princess's Castle, Mickey will walk down from the clouds on the map and get back into the main area of the game, but something different happens in the Taz. So Mickey stays up on the cloud and kind of goes to Sandcastle stage, which is supposed to be down on the mainland, but we're up in the clouds now for some reason. It's about time we talked about the map glitch. So with the map glitch, we need to have an eye on our level up the top there. So we're currently on the forest level. We could go to Lake, Blacksmith's Castle, or back to Lake or whatever. When you go into a level normally, like the forest level for example, you're going to go into that level and the ID will still say forest, and then you come out and it still says forest. But if you time your button press really well and you move to a different level the frame after you enter a level, it's going to have that new level ID, but put you in that level that Mickey was on. So if I press right off forest onto the intro level, I'm going to be in the forest, but with the ID of intro. When I come back out again, then I'm on the intro level, even though I just came out of the forest level. So this saves a little bit of time, because as I said before, you have to backtrack from level 3, Blacksmith's Castle, back to level 2, which is the lake stage. So if I'm here and I enter it, and I press right the frame after I enter it, then I'm going to go into Blacksmith's Castle, but the ID is going to be Lake. So when I'm done with Blacksmith's Castle stage and I come back out onto the map, Mickey is going to be on the lake stage, which saves that time walking back to the lake stage. You can do the same thing when going up to Good Princess's Castle from the desert stage. So when I enter here, I'm in the desert, but it says Good Princess's Castle. So when I come back out, I'm going to be on the Good Princess's Castle stage. But the map's still going to be on the bottom area of the game, and that's a glitch that we just saw in the Taz. So if Mickey walks down off the Good Princess's Castle, he's going to walk down into the other area of the map, which is the clouds. So that's how this gets all messed up in the Taz, but it does actually save a bit of time because it saves a couple of screen transitions. If you play around with this enough, you can get away from the intended levels in the game up to, for example, level 33, and in the Game Gear version you can get some really weird levels, like this one here. Absolute nightmare fuel. I love this one. So I haven't found too much other use for this glitch apart from saving a second or two, but it's pretty cool to see. And it's a fun way to kind of exploit the game where you're not supposed to be. So there's one more related glitch in the Taz at the end of the beanstalk level coming into the final level. For whatever reason, when Mickey is climbing the beanstalk on the map, he has one frame where he can press A to enter the level, just there, and that saves watching the animation of walking up to Phantom's castle. That saves about a second, but if you miss that by a frame, you'll get a glitched level which actually completely crashes the game. So that's why you'll often see speedrunners not go for that glitch even though it saves time, because they don't want to risk losing their whole run right at the end. Unless they're on like a bad run or something, they might go for it. So that's pretty much all I'll say about the map glitch, but I have made a more in-depth video explaining it in full detail, and I'll link that in the description as well. So let's go back to where we're up to with the Taz. The Taz was just entering the sandcastle stage here, and this has a lot of speed preservation tech. So I'll jump up these slopes and then butt slam down them, and we're going to preserve a whole ton of speed into this next area here. Same thing goes here. We're actually preserving speed all the way through this sand until we get to this section here where we preserve even more. Then we're going to see the skinny dipping section of the Taz, and as I said before, that helps you go through objects that would otherwise be solid because you're invisible. So we're going to climb up here. But the entire section of this Taz is done with Mickey invisible. The reason for that is, to get invisible again, you either detransform or take damage, and that's slow. So we're going to just keep doing this section as per normal, and make it through invisible. Actually Tazzing this, the way that you do it is you look at your valleys, like your X position and Y position and stuff, and also look at the splashes and everything in the water. It's pretty difficult to Taz without actually seeing your character, but it does save time, so it's worth doing. This boss fight here is one of the best bits of play around in the Taz. With this barrel, you can get into some shenanigans and clip into the wall. So I took damage there to go through the barrel, and now I'm in the wall a little bit. Now I'm going to throw the barrel at the crab shortly, and it bouncing back will push me further into the wall and come out the other side, which is lots of fun. Now we're running into an issue here in that Mickey is running a bit short on air, so we're going to do a similar clip again, but I'm going to clip into a different spot of the wall. For whatever reason, there's a little bit that's not considered underwater, so I'll restore air in that little bit here, just there. And now we have enough air to do the rest of the boss fight. So this fight's also based on RNG, so you gotta wait for the claws to go down, and I've manipulated it to be as short as possible. That wall clipping there is the only use that I've found that you can actually do, but in theory you can wall clip all over the place and save a bunch of time. What you need to wall clip though is to bounce the barrel off something else, and there's not many objects in this game which will bounce a barrel throw back at you. That's why it was possible in this fight. Back on the map screen here, we'll see we're still up in the clouds even though we shouldn't be up in the clouds, and that's a side effect of that map glitch we did before. In this room here we're going to get our first power star, and it also happens to be the last level. That brings us up to 3 health in total, and the reason we do that is so we can do some damage boosts through this level here. We could have got 4 power stars and it would have been a similar timing, but it turned out to be very slightly slower. But to find that out, I basically had to Taz the entire game twice, one with and one without the power star, because this game is not sync friendly, which means you can't just copy paste the same inputs because different stuff will happen. The rest of the Taz is just going to be a slightly more optimized version of what we saw in the RTA run, so I won't talk about too much. We have a throwing key door duplicate there, which is a bit quicker than the standstill one that was done in the RTA speedrun. We also have this room with the scary door, and it's manipulated to do big bounces because that's quicker for getting across all these areas. Then we also do some damage to get the scary door a little bit closer to this pole. So that's the Taz done in 22 minutes and 0 seconds. And I'm really happy with how this one turned out, and I was really happy to actually redo it after knowing about that Toy Workshop skip for a long time. So I'd really recommend this game both casually and as a speed game. It's got a lot of polish to it and a lot of charm. It's easy to pick up and lots of fun. If you enjoyed this content, then a subscription is always appreciated, and I should have more coming out like it soon. Thanks for watching.